So 2016 is about to come to an end, and that means it's time to look back at the movies that I've reviewed this year. I've probably seen about 40 movies that came out in 2016, but I've only actually reviewed for this channel 21 of those movies. So what I wanted to do is just kind of look back over this because it's interesting to me the way that my opinion has changed on some of these movies, how some of them that I rated not great, but kind of middle of the road, when I look back at them, I go, ooh, that's a bad movie. And other ones I rated pretty bad, I kind of actually enjoy a little bit more than I thought I would. It's also interesting to look back at the year and say my highest rated one of the year was only at a 9, so there's nothing that I would call like best of all time that came out this year that I reviewed. And likewise, my lowest was only a 3, so there was nothing that I actually thought was so bad it was good that came out this year that I watched, rated, and reviewed. But then again, hundreds of movies came out this year, and as you look at this list, the number of movies I didn't see and didn't review is kind of embarrassing, especially with some of the ones I did watch and did review, so kind of tells you how much credibility I have as a critic. But with that said, let's get started looking back over the 21 movies I have reviewed that came out this year on this channel. Coming in number 21 is Hard Target 2. I rated it with a 3 out of 10. It is not good. It's a sequel to the Jean-Claude Van Damme film from 1993, directed by John Woo, which, if you like Jean-Claude Van Damme action movies, martial arts films, it's a pretty good little film. If you like John Woo films, it's not such a great John Woo film. I love John Woo. I love Jean-Claude Van Damme. I really love the original. And this one is like an embarrassing, not really a sequel to it. It's more of a rehash of the general idea, except if you thought the Van Damme one had too much plot, you're in for a real treat here, as this movie's longer. It has significantly less plot, worse choreography, worse acting, and all around a lot of terrible, terrible moments. Next up on our list at number 20 is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows. I'm actually surprised how low on the list this one is. It's rated a 5 out of 10 whenever I reviewed it. And honestly, as I look at the other movies on this list, as to just purely enjoyment, purely would I want to watch this movie right now, this one would be much higher on the list because it's a movie I can see myself watching quite a bit. However, with that said, I understand why I rated it really low. The script is terrible. They've got good characters. They've got good actors. Like they brought Stephen Amell to play Casey Jones. Great choice. And then they give him nothing to do. Like the character is not written like the character of Casey Jones. The plot, it feels so much like a first draft of a script. Like the basic ideas are in place, but the elements don't tie together right at all. Motivations aren't clear. And just skips from plot point to plot point to plot point just to get to action beat to action beat to joke to joke to joke. And it doesn't come together well at all. So overall, a movie I can really watch. Not a great piece of cinema. Number 19 on our list. This is one that I rated a 6 out of 10. I would definitely go lower if I were to rate it now, and that is Batman the Killing Joke. When it comes to movies that just squandered their potential or just ill-conceived from the beginning, The Killing Joke kind of takes the cake this year for me, as it's based off a great graphic novel that is beloved by fans of Batman, and they took that and they turned it into a terrible, terrible movie. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First off, and primarily, and this is a good enough reason, they just add on this 30-minute prologue to it that's about Batgirl, like struggling to like be taken seriously as a superhero, and she's kind of in a relationship with Batman, and she's venting to her gay friend at work about it. I mean, it's like so many stereotypes and cliches and things like, you're not supposed to throw things like this into movies in the year 2016, and it throws all of them in it, and it's all bad. It's all stuff you're like, oh, I don't want to see Batgirl and Batman do that. This is not a good direction to go. And then you go into this beloved story. That was their prologue to it, which is a terrible decision. So then we go into the actual prologue, the story that we're supposed to see, and it just doesn't translate all that well to the screen. The animation looks really cheap, and the narrative structure storytelling shifts from the prologue into the actual comic book itself because of the nature of the comic book. And so as a film that was actually put out in theaters, very bizarre mess. Don't want to watch it again. It's an interesting film because of how ill-conceived it is, and perhaps that's the problem, is that the source material is a itty bitty little short story that you can't really accurately translate to the screen into a movie. You can translate it accurately into a short film, not a movie. And so they went for movie length by adding this bizarre thing onto the beginning, and not bizarre, bad thing onto the beginning, and it kind of ruined the whole thing. Moving up our list, we come up to number 18. That is Jack Reacher, Never Go Back. I gave it a 6 out of 10. I mean, it's passable Tom Cruise action thriller type stuff. It's just not great. It's not all that good either. It's very competent, and you can follow the story from A to B. They set moments up just like you're told to do in screenwriting. And so in the climax, we want X to happen. So have a scene Y that sets it up. Or I think my letters are backwards on that. But it just, you can see the sets up a mile away. It feels very much like a project done by someone, following all the rules, doing what you're supposed to do to make a fun Tom Cruise action adventure. So you've got the humor, you've got the girl that can beat guys up, but she's hot too. You've got the little quippy jokes, you've got just enough action, and it just feels kind of beat by beat, following the appropriate formula for action thriller with Tom Cruise. Enjoyable enough. No risks, no challenges, just safe thriller. If it comes on a Saturday afternoon on whatever streaming service, cable network you have, if you watch it, you'll be like, all right, that was fun enough. But that's about it. I can't imagine anyone being like, that was my favorite movie of the year. I can't imagine anyone being like, the Jack Reacher franchise, that's awesome. It's more like, that's good enough. And when that's your best praise, that's not a good sign. Coming in at number 17, we've got Suicide Squad, which I gave a 6.5. And this is another one, I need to watch this movie again, because I'm not quite sure if I overrated it or underrated it, or if I exactly rated it. That's a weird phrase to use. But so this movie, I really like the characters. I like their relationships with each other. And so to that extent, there were things I really enjoyed. I found it very watchable going on this adventure with them because I liked the people I was on the adventure with. However, I did not like the adventure they were on because the story was awful. The villain was terrible. The henchmen they had to battle, totally unworthy of these characters. So a very mixed bag. At the end of the day, I give it a 6.5, which is a positive review for me. So I guess I should state that at this point in time, 6.5 reviews are positive. Everything before this, I'm giving negative reviews, not recommending. Suicide Squad and above, I am recommending these films. And this is also to state the obvious that I didn't go see any terrible movies. I wasn't excited to see them. I just went, I'm not going to see that. I'm going to see just the ones that I want to see. That's my list and why it's missing a lot of things that I otherwise would have trashed. As for Suicide Squad, though, yeah, I like the characters, don't like the adventure they're on. So much squandered potential, bad storytelling. It really feels like all the rumors about re-edits and reshoots to change it to match what studio heads wanted, that all feels very true with this movie. It does not feel at all like the master plan of a director-writer that had a great idea and executed that. It feels like a guy tried to do something and then a bunch of people had a lot of notes and then they were the ones that controlled the wallet and had all the power and control. And so they're like, why don't you do this? And that's the movie we got, which is kind of a mess, but a mess that's fun to go on the ride with. Coming up next is 16, and that is Ghostbusters, which I gave a 7 out of 10. This is another one I'm interested to see if that one would drop quite a bit if I were to rewatch it, because coming out of the movie, I was like, that wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. That was quite fun. That wasn't bad, like awful. I mean, it just looked terrible from the trailers, and it looked like it was just going to be a bunch of propaganda. And I left it going, I laughed. I had fun with it. And as I've thought about the movie, as I've listened to other people's reviews, I've been more like, yeah, maybe that did have quite a bit more agenda than I thought. Ooh, maybe that wasn't so funny. It was just cheap laughs. He's dumb. Look, Chris Hemsworth dancing silly. Look, all these ladies are dancing silly. Isn't that funny? No, that's kind of pretty lowbrow basic humor. And so as time has passed, the movie's kind of been like, okay, whatever. I still enjoyed it that first time I watched it. I didn't hate it. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But when your highest praise for the movie, once again, is it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, That's not high praise at all. That's just to say it exceeded a really low expectations for it. At our next one on here, I actually wasn't quite sure where to place the one. It's Batman Return of the Caped Crusader. It's number 15 on the ranking here. Actually, when I rated it, I went between a 6 and an 8, depending on if you're a gigantic fan of the 60s Batman or not. If you're not a fan of the 60s Batman, I just gave it a 6 out of 10. It's not awful, but you won't appreciate it. If you are a fan of it, I gave it an 8 out of 10. It's a movie that you probably will enjoy. It's a very interesting continuation of the 60s Batman series and a nice homage, continuation, all kinds of other words you could use to describe it. So it's a mixed bag, so I just averaged it at 7 and put it at number 15 on this list. And the more I've thought about it, maybe I need to watch it again, but it's not one that I have any desire to watch again. It was like, oh, that was kind of cool. I know my sister wants to watch it with me. Maybe you're watching this video. Hi, sister. And I'd be totally open to that, and you can try and convince me that it's amazing. My one viewing of it, I just thought it was a little bit strange, the direction that they went with the plot, with Batman turning a specific direction in it. If you're only doing one of these movies, I wouldn't think you would do that. That's more like a sequel type idea. So that seemed a bit odd to me. Overall, interesting project, intriguing project, one that I want to be able to give a really high score. I just, in all honesty, can't give it as high of a score as I would want to give it. Next up on our list at number 14, Kickboxer Vengeance. I don't believe this was really released in theaters in the US. I gave it a 7 out of 10. This is another one. I just don't know if I would drop the score if I rewatched it. To me, I watched it, I had a good time with it, and I rate it like movies kind of on a scale. Like a dumb action movie, if I enjoy it and it's a dumb action movie, I recommend it because I enjoyed it. It's as simple as that. It might have all kinds of problems, but if I watch it, I had fun watching that, and I'd watch it again. I got to give it a positive review. And that's what happened in this movie. I watched it, I really enjoyed that. Put my review up, had a lot of views, and a lot of people telling me how terrible this movie was, how very, very wrong I was, and pointing things out to me where I hadn't noticed that. That's a valid point. And other times they're just kind of being mean and said mean things to me, which I love. But overall, a movie that not great cinema, not great filmmaking, but very much so a movie that I can just enjoy as a martial arts film. If you just kind of like dumb martial arts films in the vein of old Steven Seagal, Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, I think that this is a movie that you should be able to enjoy if you're not looking back on old Van Damme movies with rosy-colored tinted glasses on. If you're like, you can't get out of the fact that his movies weren't great and he was a bad actor, that he had like a certain charm to him, but not really a lot of charisma, especially early on. If you can't get out of that, if you can't see that, then you're probably going to hate this movie. If you know that and understand that there's modern movies made kind of like that, and this is one of them, yeah, I think you could very definitely like this movie. Moving it up, I've got London Has Fallen, the sequel to Olympus Has Fallen with Gerard Butler, which I gave a 7 out of 10. This is a movie that I just thought was a very solid action film. It's not aiming to be great. It has its issues. It strains plausibility. But does it deliver on having an action hero that I want to spend time with and watch him beat people up and shoot people? Absolutely it does. Does the person that's going along with him in Aaron Eckhart's president character, do I enjoy his character? And do I think these two guys work well together and have a nice chemistry and rapport? Absolutely I do. Is this a movie I'm going to be like, best action movie of all time? No, not at all. Do I wish there were more movies like this made? Of course, absolutely. There is a shortage of mid-budget action movies. We got tons of regular blockbuster superhero spectacle films, but we don't have as much of the middle grade action movies like this of the 90s. And so to that point, I want to encourage more movies like this to be made, and I thought this was a very decent and enjoyable film. Coming in at number 7 is Independence Day Resurgence. This movie got trashed by a lot of people. And I mean, just today I was watching some people's worst of the year list, and they had this one as the worst movie of the year. And that just wasn't my experience. Not a great movie, not one of my favorite movies, but when it comes to, was I entertained? Yeah. Did I think it was a good enough sequel to the original? It was good enough. And that's not high praise. That's kind of actually a slight at the film. But then again, I didn't exactly like give it a great review. A 7 out of 10 is only like, yeah, it's good. I recommend it. And so I just don't understand most of the hate for the film, basically because it's not like the original was this wonderful, amazing film. It's very much carried by the charm and charisma of Will Smith, and this movie definitely has a hole the size of Will Smith. If they had someone in this movie, in one of the roles, if whatever Hemsworth in this movie was as charming, or if the Will Smith stepson, whatever he is, son in this movie was as charismatic as him, this movie would be a lot better and feel a lot bit better. But because they're not, they're just kind of like, okay, they're good enough. That's so many things about it's good enough. The movie feels worse than it is. But really, I just don't understand some of the criticisms of the film. Even, I believe John Roca said he really likes the movie except the last 20, 30 minutes. And I don't even know what that means. Like, I don't know why you would get to the end of this movie and the third act would somehow bother you. It's a different finale than we had from the first film, and that's a good thing. In interesting direction, I like the way it went. So anyway, not a great movie. I'm defending it mostly just because so many people dislike it so much, not because I'm like, that movie was awesome. I'm not looking to watch it again anytime soon, but I'm not afraid. I'm like, I'd enjoy it if I'd watch it, or maybe I would discover just how bad it was. Next on our list at number 11 is the movie Ark. This is a direct-to-Netflix film. I don't know exactly how the production works, but I believe it was released in its broad form to Netflix directly. It has Robbie Amell, Stephen Amell from Arrow. It's his cousin is the lead in it, and it's a time loop movie. So a lot of people have both fairly and unfairly compared it to Groundhog Day and Edge of Tomorrow. I get the comparison. They're all time loop movies, so it's fair to say it's another time loop movie. A lot of people are like, it's just a ripoff of Edge of Tomorrow. It's a time loop movie. It's a subgenre of time travel, subgenre of sci-fi. It's not really a ripoff of Edge of Tomorrow at all, as the plot is totally different. It's like a home invasion type story. It's very different, very small scale, neat little time loop thriller. Is it great? No, but it's worth your time. It's short and it doesn't outstay its welcome. Like right as you're feeling like it might be going a little bit long, it's over. It's just very much they knew how much story they could tell with the scope and size they could go with the movie, and I think they nailed it pretty well with what they should have done with it. It's not one I've been rushed to watch again, but I enjoyed the one time I watched it. If you like time travel, time loop movies, sci-fi, dystopia type stuff, I would recommend you check this out. If that's not really your thing, this probably isn't going to be the film to convince you. I'd definitely point you towards Edge of Tomorrow over this movie. But it's a good film in its own right. Coming in at number 10, we are to the top 10 of the movies that I saw this year. But like I said, I didn't see a ton of movies this year, and I reviewed even less film this year. So of those movies, at number 10 is Jason Bourne, also with a 7 out of 10. If this wasn't Jason Bourne, if this was Jack Travis versus the government or whatever, I think Jack Travis is actually from a different movie. I might even rate it higher, but because it's a Jason Bourne film, it just feels like they were going through the checklist. Like, do we have a chase? Oh yeah, we got a chase. Check. Do we have the hand-to-hand fight where he uses something interesting? Check. Do we have some sort of revelation about his family and backstory? Check. And you just kind of felt so much like they had a just checklist of things you had to do, shots you had to have, the action sequence that had to be there, and that's the movie we got. And you had the right number of twists and turns, but they were all the twists and turns that you knew were supposed to be there. So even if they surprised you, they weren't that much fun to actually experience because you knew they were coming, because that's the type of thing that has to be in this movie. Still, a solid, enjoyable film. It's not like I would knock specific plot points too much or big, gigantic issues with it. It's just more Jason Bourne, more of this character, following the checklist, following the template. I've been there, I've done that, and it's been better before, so why are we doing this again? Moving up the list, Batman v Superman. This is our 9th film on the list. It is also a 7 out of 10. This was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. And to state the obvious, the reaction to this film was not so great. And for good reason. Clearly, they had too many storylines they were trying to cram in there. It felt to me like they started out with Man of Steel 2, and then they realized we can get Batman in it, so then it turned into Batman v Superman, but they kept this Man of Steel 2 plot line that was Lex Luthor shows up, he's angry and doesn't trust Superman, so he's trying to bring him down, he wants to make Doomsday to kill him. That felt like that was that movie. And you can see that movie in there. And then they cram in Batman v Superman into that plot line already. So you just cram in now Lex Luthor and Bruce Wayne do not trust the Superman fellow. And so they're both trying to stop him. And so we just kind of cram in a couple of these scenes where Batman's investigating this thing over here, while Clark Kent is investigating Lex Luthor over here. And then the movie unfolds. And then they went, we're going to do a cinematic universe, so let's make it Dawn of Justice 2. And so then they go, okay, we've already got this kind of set deal with Man of Steel 2 and Batman v Superman. We'll just cram this Gal Gadot in here as Wonder Woman, and then we'll have her check on her email, and we'll put Aquaman in there. And that's kind of what the movie felt like to me. That they started with script number 1, and they just changed it into each new iteration as they went along. And any one of those movies would have been better than the movie we did get. And there's a lot of stuff I like in here. A lot of things I really enjoyed. It's a very enjoyable, messy movie to me. It's a mess that I enjoy watching, but it's a mess. Interesting. So right here, I've just had, let me see if I look at it, about 7 movies that were all rated 7 out of 10. That was the most popular review that I gave out this year, was 7 out of 10. And that makes a lot of sense because it's a pretty safe kind of point where a movie falls. And it's interesting as I look at this list where I look at like Batman v Superman, to me that it's only a 7 out of 10 just is such a disappointment. That is me giving it a bad review because it should be a 9 out of 10. It should be a 9.5 out of 10. It's only a 7 out of 10, and I'm probably being overly generous. It probably should be much lower than that. And so you can see that's a movie that my expectations were up here, and it only ended like right here. Then again, Kickboxer Vengeance, Ghostbusters, expectations down here, and somehow they made it higher. So perception changes for me very much so that movie-going experience as to when I rate some of these movies, where they kind of land. Movie like Ark, a Netflix movie that was very small scale, low budget, 7 out of 10 feels just about right for it. That seems like what they were aiming for. They're not trying to make the best timed loop movie of all time. They're just trying to make a solid, enjoyable film. A 7 out of 10. Batman v Superman, aiming for up here. Very disappointing that I put it here, but really it probably should be down here. Ghostbusters, once again, probably being too generous. Jason Bourne, once again, should be up here. It's down here. And so I feel like that's just pure disappointment to put that one at a 7 out of 10, whereas Independence Day Resurgence, where a bunch of people have it down here, I've got it up here. It's all a matter of perspective. And I think that's what makes some of it very interesting. The way we talk about movies is even our perspective on them changes so much, what even that rating is when you put the number on it, when you put that title on it, your letter grade on it, whatever your rating system is. It's so interesting the context under which it got that, whether it was below expectations, above expectations. That's just fascinating to me. Next up on our list, number 8 is The Legend of Tarzan with a 7.5 out of 10. This one's interesting to me because I had really low expectations for it, and I thought it was just a really solid adventure film. The reviews for it weren't great, and the trailers hadn't looked all that good to me. And then you watch the movie and it was a lot funnier than I was expecting. Samuel L. Jackson was a different type of character than I was expecting him to be. I mean, I actually didn't have any expectations for who he would be. And so I just kind of defaulted to Nick Cage, stakes on a plane, yelling, shouty Samuel L. Jackson. And he's not that. He's like this charismatic, very different type of character with more layers to him. So I ended up liking Legend of Tarzan much more than I was expecting to. And so I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. And I've been meaning to watch it with my wife and show it to her. I just haven't gotten around to it yet because I think she's going to really like it. She's like, I don't want to watch that. I don't want to watch a Tarzan movie. I'm like, no, I think you're really going to like this. And I think she's really going to like it. Next up on our list at number 7 is 10 Cloverfield Lane with a 7.5. This is when I was late to the party on it. I didn't watch it until like late summertime. When it came out on Redbox, and I really enjoyed it. It was a very solid film. Not for the reasons that I think they took, the risks they took in the third act, the direction they took things. I don't think it entirely holds together as strongly as you might want it to. But very strong, solid film. And I like that this Cloverfield genre, mini subgenre, whatever it is, because they're not really sequels to each other, but its own version of a franchise, that they're telling weird, unique stories, and that they are telling like a kidnapped or hostage story that can go off in weird, wacky, weird directions. I love that movies are like that being made. And so I want to rate this one higher. But where was my actual enjoyment and satisfaction? About a 7.5. Next up on our list is Star Trek Beyond with an 8 out of 10. And this was just a really solid continuation of the current Star Trek franchise. It feels the least interesting of the three of them to me, in that the rebooted 2009 just had so much lively energy to it and didn't know what to expect, and so it just launches Star Trek into a new direction. Then you get Star Trek Into Darkness, which was so divisive and people hated it so much. Some people loved it. And so then it was just kind of they brought Khan in, so it was just all kinds of energy sparked by that. And this one was just kind of, that was a very solid entry in the series that was a little bit more like the original series than this current franchise. So overall, 8 out of 10, and I don't have like a strong desire to rewatch it. And so maybe I might even go lower if I rewatched it, but just a very safe, solid entry, but not a risky one that swings for the fences the way J.J. Abrams' first two films did, where, I mean, they just made big, bold changes that could really make people mad and did make people mad. Whereas this one was like, okay, that was more, I guess it's good enough, but not something that really stirs your emotions in one direction or the other. Now we move into the top 5, where I rated some of these pretty high up there. Number 5 on my list is The Magnificent Seven, which I gave an 8.5. I really enjoyed this movie. Antoine Fuqua, who directed Olympus Has Fallen and The Shooter, Training Day, is slowly becoming kind of one of my favorite action directors these days, as he's kind of making a lot of these mid-budget type movies or a Western that we don't see a lot of these days, and just delivering very consistent quality action films, very much in the vein of what we got a lot of back in the 80s and the 90s, except with a 21st century spin on them. And he's working with great talent when he does them. You got Denzel Washington, Chris Pratt, Vincent D'Onofrio. So I really enjoyed this movie. It absolutely lived up to my expectations, and I had pretty high expectations. It's the type of movie that made me go, I hope this does good enough that we get more movies like this. I don't need every Western to be an Oscar bait movie. I want just a fun ride Western in the style of old Westerns, except with 21st century pacing and effects. And that's what this movie delivered. Very much enjoyed it. I think it just now came out on Blu-ray. I want to go pick it up because I very much enjoyed this movie. Coming in at number 4 is Doctor Strange, also with an 8.5 out of 10. Marvel has mastered their formula. It took a weird character like Doctor Strange that I have very little interest in, delivered another solid entry that was fun, it was funny, made you love Doctor Strange, made you want to see more of Doctor Strange. It has the same problems, though, of the Marvel formula, in that the villain's not so great. It kind of goes beat by beat down this Marvel formula of introduce him at a certain phase of life, and then right around an hour into the movie, you introduce the villain and his kind of scheme, and then, hijinks ensue. And there's some sort of death or setback right before the third act. It's pretty straightforward blockbuster movie template, and it does it great. And so it's a great fun movie, and it almost hurt. Actually, I just realized on my list I didn't review it properly, but Fantastic Beasts. So I saw Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them just a few weeks after I watched Doctor Strange, and one of my thoughts was, man, after Doctor Strange, the magic in this movie just seems so elementary, like just so basic and non-imaginative, whereas Doctor Strange had such imaginative effects. So anyway, moving into my top 3 of the year, and these are based off of, if they have the same rating, I'm doing some creative choices, but beyond that, it's based off the rating itself. So at number 3 on the list is Bloodfather, giving it an 8.5. This was such a surprise to me. I did not know anything about Bloodfather before it came out, and then this movie come out with Mel Gibson that people are like, oh, it's kind of like Taken with Mel Gibson. It's not like Taken with Mel Gibson. And people with just lots of feedback like that. It turns out it's very much more of a family drama with a bit of action in it, a bit of a thriller vibe, or definitely a thriller vibe to it, but not an action movie like Taken really at all. But you definitely get to see Mel Gibson beat some guys up and shoot people and be a tough guy and be awesome defending his daughter, which I guess in that very narrow sense is like Taken. But it's such a great drama and wonderful performance from Mel Gibson, and just so much so showing how good of an actor, entertainer, performer that he is, that just his character should be really unlikable, but Mel Gibson has so much charm and charisma that he makes him likable when he's not, and makes him funny when on paper some of these lines might not have been funny, but the movie actually has a pretty good sense of humor to it. His relationship with William H. Macy, great chemistry between these two characters, and just powerful emotion and acting in it. It's just such a good little film that kind of came out of nowhere for me. So that's number 3 on my list was Bloodfather, a movie that I didn't even know was coming out this year. Coming in at number 2 on my list was my number 1 most anticipated movie of the year, and that was Rogue One with an 8.5. So Star Wars with Disney, when they first announced that, I was never a hater of that. I always thought it was a pretty good idea for the same reason that it's worked so well for Marvel, in that Disney lets these studios do their own thing and basically helps them create consistent, quality, entertaining products. Now, that means there's formulaic issues with it. Certainly has a shiny 21st century blockbuster gloss on it. And the third act in Rogue One is just so good. It is so powerful, emotionally satisfying. Best space battle since Return of the Jedi. Incredible ground battles like we haven't seen in Star Wars before. And just overall a very enjoyable film that is a prequel that only adds to the originals and doesn't take away, it doesn't hurt the lore at all. Even if you don't like the movie, I don't think you would say, oh, it messed up the storytelling, like Vader's messed up. Because no, you wouldn't say that. You'd be like, oh, I didn't like the movie, but Vader was awesome and he was so cool in that. Or other things. You would say positive things about how it affects the lore, while maybe not liking the movie. But I like the movie. Great experience. Fun time. Oh, I've got a cup for it right there. There, I got a special Alamo Drafthouse cup designed by Mondo. Just sitting there right there for this video. But second highest rated movie of the year, which means my number 1 highest rated movie of the year on my channel. Now, if I were to make a list now, re-rate all the movies, rank them based off favorites, as I might be doing in a couple days, this might not be number 1, or maybe it would still be number 1. But number 1 on my list with a 9 out of 10 is The Accountant, which I would not have guessed that coming into this year. I wouldn't have guessed that going into that movie, but based off the way I reviewed movies this year, The Accountant was the highest reviewed movie that I did for this channel that came out in the year 2016. And looking back, I'm not terribly embarrassed by that, other than the fact of all the movies I haven't seen this year or did not review this year. But as for the ones on this list, I really liked The Accountant. I loved what they did with this story. It was an interesting story to tell, and talking about someone on the autism spectrum, and just relating to him in a way that at first I was like, oh, is this going to get really cringeworthy as they tell a very strange story about a character on the autism spectrum? And it doesn't go in that direction. It very much feels real, true to people that you know in real life, while at the same time being respectful and making him a likable character, telling a fun, exciting adventure story, having a thriller element to it, mystery elements to it. I just really enjoyed this film. Now that it's coming out on Blu-ray, I need to pick it up, watch it again. Maybe it doesn't hold up quite as well on rewatching, but that first time experience watching it, I really enjoyed it. Maybe one too many twists in the third act, maybe straining some plausibility. Fair enough. But overall, I just really enjoyed this movie. Great action sequences, and it's from a director that did one of my favorite movies in Warrior, so I was very happy to see him delivering yet another very solid film in this one. And a type of movie, as I mentioned before with London Has Fallen, that I want more of these mid-range action thrillers like we got before, and this is just a great example of the type of movie that I want more of. Should it be number one on my list? Probably not, but hey, it's my list, and that's true to the way I rated it, and in light of all the movies I didn't review this year, and I haven't seen it. Like, I'm going to watch Hell or High Water later today. I'm sure that's going to be in my top 5 for the year. You know, hopefully so. Hopefully it won't be bottom and I'm disappointed by it. We will see. Maybe I'll even do a review of it. So with all that said, how about you? What were the movies that you've actually watched this review and had thoughts about it? Which movies have had the highest changes of opinion for you? Like when you first watched it, you loved it, and now you don't love it so much, or you hated it, now you got a better opinion. Which movies have changed as time has passed? Because really that's what this video is more about for me. Not so much about the definitive, these are the best of the year and the worst of the year, because that's not what this list is. But it's interesting to talk about how our opinions change as time happens. So, which movies for you has dropped from great praise to not so great praise, or you've appreciated it more as time has gone on? Tell me in the comment section, because I don't want to just talk about 2016 movies. I want to talk about 2016 movies with you. So tell me in the comment section what you think about this year's and how time has changed your perspective. With that said, if you're new to my channel and you've never clicked that subscribe button, please consider clicking that subscribe button and get all of my videos to show up right there in your feed. If you're already a subscriber, you might need to click that little bell next to the word subscribe to adjust your settings. YouTube sometimes gets a little bit weird in what videos they put in your feed on your homepage and which ones they don't. So you might need to adjust that to make sure my videos are showing up if you want my videos to show up there. And as always, thank you for watching.